Okay. Good morning, gentlefolk and jelly beans. Good to see you all. I'm Tad. I'm going to be reading here for approximately the next hour. And you are welcome to hang out here with me, which I think would be a good plan. Because otherwise, I'll just be sitting here talking to myself. And not that I don't do that anyway, but I don't even have a dog down here, who are the usual ones who have to listen to me when I'm talking to myself. The cat is asleep. She doesn't give a damn. So I'm grateful. I'm grateful. Anyway, hello. Good to see you. It is Sunday, just about 1:01 a.m. in my neck of the woods, which is the Pacific coast of California, or mile or so, a couple miles from the coast. But we're in the basic coastal area. And it's been another long week of working and stuff, and nothing particularly interesting to relate. I'm struggling along with various soft tissue issues, so I'm still wearing weird things like that, and going to doctors and messing about and having blood tests and stuff. I don't know. It might actually have been slightly better today. I hope so. These things, as I've mentioned, tend to go through these long cycles. Well, the bad ones do. And it takes almost as long for it to go down off the crest as it does to get there in the first place, which builds up over a period of time. Anyway, I only mention this because it's hell on the working environment, and it's hell on just about everything. I have trouble reading. I can't even hold things for very long because it's actually painful. This is not, by the way, this is not because I am soliciting people to say, "Oh, you poor person. Oh, it's so sad." More just because I've kind of gotten into the habit of explaining what's going on, and there aren't a heck of a lot of other interesting things happening because I'm just trying to work as much as I can. I have to take a lot of breaks, so and then every now and then, get out and kind of walk around and keep the blood circulating because that's one of the things that actually helps when you're having a lot of inflammation. So I got the dog out for a couple of walks and go out and walk around in the back and deal with various things like that. Other than that, everything pretty much normal. Again, working on Navigator's Children. Finally found a kind of a process that made me feel like I had some control over the situation because, as I've mentioned in the past, it's a very weird manuscript, not because of anything to do with the inherent nature of the book. It is the final volume of a series, but there's nothing particularly odd or unexpected about that for me. I usually finish things when I start them, at least books. Household chores, not always so much, but so I'm working on it, but because, as I've mentioned several times, and I won't go into in depth, it's been strange because there have been so many gaps in the process of working on it that a lot of things have changed that would have changed if they had changed during a normal process of writing a final volume. I would simply have put in the new versions as I went, or come up with a solution and implemented it. But now I'm going back, and I went back and changed a lot of things in the third volume before it went to press. And so as a result, then I have to feed those new changes in to the final volume. And it's been strange and interesting trying to make that all work. But I think I've finally kind of gotten to that point now where it's making sense to me again, and I'm brought, catching things up to where I was when I had to stop and start rethinking things, if that makes any sense. So that's kind of been a one satisfying thing about the week, I think, is that I felt like I finally got a little bit of a handle on, how the book will now take its final form and getting into a routine, because I can only speak for me as a writer, although I suspect that there's truth here for many writers and many people in many professions or crafts or whatever you want to call it, that I need momentum. I need rhythm. I need to be working at things regularly, because then I'm thinking about them regularly. And that means the next time I sit down to actually do writing, I've thought about what I'm going to be working on and that I have a plan. And so at the end of each day's work, I can say, okay, here's what I'm going to be working on tomorrow. So I'd better be ready to do that and have thought it through a bit and gone back if necessary and looked at anything relevant, either in the way of just the book itself as already written, or as sometimes research has to be done, and so that's part of it as well. Sorry if I'm being distracting. I'm I'm playing with this weird little triangle on my chin. I don't mean to be distracting about it. It's very complicated for me having a little triangle on my chin. It's I haven't figured it out yet. It's like, do I want that there? Do I want to go back to a beard? Do I want to do goatee? Do I want to just shave it all off? So these are these things. If I was an influencer, it would matter. These would be the kind of things that I'd call in all my people about, and we'd talk about it. Do you think it's time to like thin my eyebrows? But the only influence I have is just being a writer guy. So, but it puzzles me and it disturbs me, and I keep noticing that if I'm not careful, because I tend to lay my hand on this side of my face, and then it winds my little triangle thing winds up going the wrong one direction. It's kind of like clunking off to the side, and then it gets even worse when I'm looking at it on the camera here, because of course it's backwards. It's a mirror version. So every time I go, oh, it's not straight anymore, I reach up and mess with it, and then of course I do it with the wrong hand and I do it the wrong direction. So not that anybody needed to know any of that, but I am fully committed to giving you people the absolute truth of what a weird single cell organism that I am. Anything else that I need to talk about before I say hello to people? I can't really think of anything. As I said, it's been the last several weeks, which is actually kind of the way I planned it. I wanted to get through Narrow Dark and get that sent off precisely for this reason, so that I could just really dive back in deep into Navigator's Children. I'm also thinking about what I'm going to work on next now. So that's also part of the. Oh, God, I've done it again. Um, Goddamn triangle. Um, but so I'm also thinking about what I'm going to work on next, and we're going through all kinds of other, lifestyle, domestic stuff that we're trying to figure out, and so but it's none of it's much really worth sharing. Not anything shameful or worrisome or anything. It's just like, how much can I dump onto people? It's not that interesting. Um, Otherwise, everything's fine. People are fine around the house. Animals are fine, except that we had a windy day today, so of course Johnny was nervous. Big John, Big Nervous, as I often call him, does not like rain, wind, thunder, airplanes, helicopters, sudden rattling of bags. God forbid anything falls on the floor. Pantry doors that open and things fall out are one of his absolute deepest phobic fears. Bless him. He's such a sweet dog, and he's such a good dog, and he's very brave. He's like Custard the dragon. He can be very, very brave at the right times, and he's chased big animals out of our yard, coyotes and stuff, and he goes after the turkeys very aggressively. Thank God he's never caught one. But boy, God, sounds, nature just set him right off. He is a very timid dog when it comes to anything unexpected. I used to think that it was, maybe he'd have had something happen in his puppyhood that had traumatized him. But more and more, I think it's just how he's just how he's wired, to use an old fashioned way of saying this. I mean, I think it's just chemicals with him. I think he's just what they refer to sometimes as a nervous dog, and that's all there is to it. But and I often say, because all of our animals are like neurotic or crazy, and our kids are pretty interesting too. And of course, Deb and I are not shining examples of sanity by many standards. So I oftentimes just say, well, I mean, thank God that they're in a family, in a home setting where being whatever you really are is encouraged and okay. So if Johnny's going to be scared of everything, thank God he's not living with people who are like, what's wrong with you, you damn dog, and like whacking him with a stick or something. We're just like, oh, Johnny, are you having a bad day today? Oh, poor guy. Come here, let me pet you, let me soothe you. Anyway, so with all of that nothing jibber jabbered, I am going to go in and here and check and see who's here. And first in line this morning is my sister-in-law, Lisa. Good morning, sweetie. Good to see you. Was just replying to some stuff of yours on social media today, if I remember correctly. So anyway, good to see you. Lots of love. Holger, good morning. And sounds like Holger is having a nice time wherever Holger may happen to be, from a sunny forest rest. Well, that does sound nice. It was quite spectacular here today. We're just come out of a nice stretch of warm, sunny weather, and now apparently there's some cold weather coming in. And so all of a sudden today it was very dramatic. There's lots of wind, and as I mentioned, which of course petrified the dog. But for me, it was pretty cool, except that, of course, I feel bad when the dog feels bad. Who else is here? Petra, hello, good morning. And a special hello to Tad. Well, thank you. How very nice. Ronnie, good morning to you. And Cliff, hello. Best wishes returned to you and your family. Ilva, hello, good morning. Lovely to see you, and hugs back to you. Mark, good morning to you. Debbie. And Debbie is checking in from sunny but chilly Norfolk. Well, glad that you are spending some time with us. And I haven't been in Norfolk for many years. Of course, I haven't been in England for many years. Deb and I are going to try and go this year because we miss all of our loved ones and friends over there. Wouter checks in to say good evening, Chad, morning all, and including Iris in that greeting. Slow morning after a great beer festival yesterday. Well, that, I mean, who could complain about that? That sounds pretty good, all right. David Pudney, checking in from the Isle of Wight. Excellent. Thank you, David. I don't think we've had you on before, or if so, I don't think with your last name attached, so lovely to see you. Carlo, checking in from Germany. A real pleasure. Good to see you, Carlo. Anamika, good morning, good morning. Sandra, checking in from South Africa, and it's chilly there too. I'm sorry to hear it, although in your case, it's getting colder, right, in South Africa. You're now in kind of like autumn, or what we would think of as autumn. Do you call it autumn there, or fall, when it's that time of the year heading towards winter, even though it's technically in the other half of the world, I guess so. Yeah, right. Anyway, if not, correct me, because I don't know half the things I think I know, and I definitely don't know the half the things I think I don't know. So it's always useful to have people explain things to me. Kristen, good to see you. Hello. And let's see who else. Christina, good to see you too. And yes, we are off to an exciting part of the story, and you are going to a musical tonight with your mother. Excellent, excellent, excellent. Glad to hear it. Mahmoud, happy Mother's Day. Oh, God, yes, thank you. Thank you for reminding me, too. I have a mother, and I need to call her tomorrow. Who else is here? Matt, checking in from Kansas. Ah, so Matt is up late. Sunflowers to all. Sunflowers are fine things, aren't they? They really are. And Emily, there is my niece's daughter, Emily. I apologize. I still haven't figured out what that is technically called, but it's good to see you anyway. So a pleasure. And Deb would send her love, except she's snoozing. James, hello, hello. Good to see you. Hazel, and there is my mother-in-law. So we have nice representation of the family online. And who else? Is there anybody else I haven't said hello to yet? Matt, Sandra, Rosalba. Hello, good morning to you too. So a pleasure to have you all with me. I can't think if there's anything else I need to think about. I don't think so. I think I'm just going to jump in and start reading. When we were last, and we really are coming down to the closing 40, 50 pages of the book now. So only a few more weeks. Where we were in the story was that Rini and her group, which is Kabu and Martine, and Orlando and Fredericks, and some various other people that we haven't actually met yet have all showed up in the Atasco's artificial city called Temaloon, which is based on the idea that the horse did not die out in the Americas, and therefore they had achieved a much more, not a higher level of civilization, because that's insulting to the people who were in the Americas, but a more industrialized, yeah, I guess that's probably the best way to say it, a more industrialized civilization, because they had farm animals, horses, et cetera, which is one of the things that helped in Eurasia. So anyway, so that's what Temaloon is. Temaloon was an experiment by Bolivar Atasco in creating this alternate version of South and North and Central America. Anyway, so, and then Sellers, Mr. Sellers, who you all met, has just showed up, and he is talking to the people in this room, and the ones, including the newcomers, and telling them what he discovered and how he discovered it, and why they're all in Temaloon in the first place. So that's what I'm reading. It cannot have been very easy for any of you to come here, Sellers repeated. It was certainly very difficult to gather you here, so I hope you will hear me out before making up your minds. He stopped and took a deep sighing breath. Rini was oddly touched. There was a living person behind the bizarre blank sim, somebody with fears and worries like anyone else. As I said, I noticed unexplained patterns in the virtual universe some call the data sphere. Excessive activity in certain areas, particularly in the wholesale accessing of technical libraries, and the abrupt disappearance from their jobs of many top names in network and VR-related technologies. I began to examine these events more closely. Money, too, left its own trails as stocks were sold unexpectedly, businesses suddenly liquidated, and other businesses founded. I discovered after long research that most of these activities were being controlled by a single group of people, although they had shielded their transactions so well that only luck and a certain talent for pattern recognition allowed me to find them and learn their names. These people, wealthy and powerful men and women, were a consortium that called themselves the Grail Brotherhood. Kinda Christian thing? Suggested the robot goggle boy. God hoppers?
I saw nothing particularly Christian in their activities, Sellers said. They were spending incalculable amounts of money on technology, apparently building something. What that something was, I could not discover, but I had a great deal of time on my hands, and my curiosity was aroused. I pursued this investigation for a number of years, growing ever more uneasy. It seemed unlikely that anyone would put as much effort and expense into something as the Brotherhood had, and still keep it secret. At first, I assumed that the project was a long-term business being built from the ground up. But after a while, the sheer amount of money and time dumped into this invisible resource began to make that seem unlikely. How could this Brotherhood spend uncountable billions on something, the resources of entire family fortunes or a lifetime's hoarding by many of the world's richest people, poured down a metaphorical hole for 2 decades, earning nothing, and still hope to make a profit? What business could possibly be worth that sort of investment? I considered other goals the Brotherhood might have, some of them as extreme as any of the most lurid net entertainments. The overthrow of governments? These people already overthrew governments as easily as an average person might change jobs or wardrobes. World conquest? Why? These people already had everything a human could want. Unimaginable luxury and power. One of the Brotherhood, the financier Zhen Bao, ranked on his personal income, is the 15th richest country in the world. Zhen Bao! Quan Li was horrified. He is one of the men who has done this to my granddaughter? She rocked fretfully in her chair. They call him emperor. The Chinese government does nothing without his approval. Sellers inclined his head. Just so. But why would such people wish to do anything to upset the balance of world power? I asked myself. They are world power. So what were they doing, and why were they doing it? And, asked Sweet William, I'll do the drum roll, Chuck. The answer is... There are still more questions than answers, I fear. When I began to encounter rumors of something called the Otherland, supposedly the world's largest and most powerful simulation network, I understood the what at last. But the why? It is still a mystery. Saying this like some Tabnet-like conspiracy? Asked the chrome battle robot. Space aliens? Something? Far scanning you. It is indeed that, Sellers replied. A conspiracy. If it were not, why was such an immense exercise kept secret? But if you think I am merely an alarmist, consider the factor that I know has brought most of you here. The Brotherhood has an unusual interest in children. He paused, but now the room was silent. Even Itasco and his wife were raptly attentive. Once I knew who to watch, once I began to discover the names of Otherland's secret masters, I could hunt for more specific kinds of information. I discovered that several of the organization's key members have an exceptional interest in children, but one that seems to go bizarrely farther than even pedophilia. Based on the quantities of medical and sociological research they have sponsored, the number of pediatric specialists who briefly occupied the payrolls of companies linked to the Brotherhood, the number of youth-oriented facilities, adoption agencies, sports clubs, interactive networks, which were founded or bought up by the Brotherhood. This interest is clearly professional, all-encompassing, and frighteningly inexplicable. Mr. Jays, Rini muttered. The bastards. Exactly. Sellers nodded his uppermost blank space. I apologize, he said. I am taking longer than I wish to explain this. He rubbed at the place where his forehead would be. I have thought about this so long, and now I find there is so much to tell. But what could they want with these children? Asked Quan Li. I am sure you are right, but what do they want? Sellers lifted his hands. I wish I knew. The Grail Brotherhood has built the most powerful, sophisticated simulation network imaginable. At the same time, they have manipulated and injured the minds of thousands of children. I still have no idea why. In fact, I summoned you here, all of you, in hopes that together we might discover some answers. You put on a good show, Ducky, said Sweet William cheerfully, and I admire the little touches very much, although the preventing me from going offline bit is rapidly losing its charm. Why don't you just take your strange little story to the news nets instead of involving us all in this cloak and dagger? I tried, in the early days, to do what you suggest. 2 reporters and 3 researchers were killed. The news nets broadcast nothing. I am only here to speak to you because I had kept myself anonymous. Sellers paused for another long breath. I am shamed by those deaths, but they taught me that this is not a mere obsession on my part. This is a war. He turned, surveying all the faces at the table. The members of the Brotherhood are too powerful and too well connected. But my attempt to interest others in an investigation did bring me one huge piece of luck. One of the researchers found and contacted Bolivar Atasco and his wife, Silviana. Although they refused to answer the researcher's questions, the way in which they refused interested me, and I followed up on my own. I was not immediately successful. We thought you were a madman, said Silviana Atasco dryly. I still think that is possible, senor. Sellers bowed his shapeless blank head. Fortunately for us all, the Atascos, who were among the earliest members of the Grail Brotherhood, had fallen away from the central body and left the board of directors several years before. They retained their investment in the form of this simulation, Temiloon, but otherwise had nothing to do with the day-to-day affairs of the consortium. Senora, perhaps you would like to tell a little of your experience. Bolivar Atasco started. He seemed to have been thinking of something else. He looked helplessly to his wife, who rolled her eyes. It is simple, she said. We needed a more sophisticated simulation engine for our work. We had gone as far as possible with existing technology. We were approached by a group of wealthy men. There were no women in the group then, who had heard of our early versions of Temiloon, created with what was then the state-of-the-art technology. They were planning to build the most comprehensive simulation platform ever conceived, and they brought us in to help supervise the construction of that platform. She curled her lip. I never liked them. She might make a better good king than her husband, Rini decided. They wouldn't let me do my job properly, Bolivar Atasco added. I mean to say there are totally unknown factors of complexity in something that large and rapid. But when I tried to ask questions, when I tried to find out why some things were being done in the peculiar way the Brotherhood had chosen, I was interfered with. So I gave them my resignation. That is all? The woman with the translator accent sounded furious. You just said, I don't approve, and resigned, but hung on to your big playground? How dare you speak like that to us? Silviana Tasco demanded. All of this, these things of which Sellers speaks, her husband waved his hands in vaguely all-encompassing circles. We knew nothing of them. When Sellers came to us, that was the first time we heard. Please. Sellers gestured for quiet. As the Atascos say, they were unaware. You can judge them harshly if you wish, but we are here by their permission, so perhaps it would be better to hold that judgment until you have all the facts. The woman who had spoken sat back, tight-lipped. To hurry through what has already gone on too long for one sitting, I approached the Atascos, Sellers continued. After much effort, I was able to convince them that there were things about the Grail Brotherhood and Otherland they did not know. Using their access to the network, I was able to do some further investigating. Only a little, however, because I dared not attract attention either to the Atascos or myself. It quickly became clear to me that I could not hope to achieve anything working alone. Still, I could not bear to send more people to their deaths. I cannot overemphasize the power of the Brotherhood. They have immense holdings in all parts of the world. They control, or at least influence, armies and police forces and governmental bodies in all the world's states. They killed those researchers as swiftly as a man swats a fly, and paid no more penalty for it than that man would. Who would join me against such enemies, and how could I contact them? The answer came fairly easily, at least to the first question. Those who had suffered at these people's hands would wish to help. Those who had lost friends and loved ones to the Brotherhood's inexplicable conspiracy. But I dared not put more innocents at risk, and I also needed people who would be able to bring skills to the struggle, because a shared concern alone will not be enough. So I conceived of a sort of task, like something from an ancient folk tale. Those who could find Temaloon would be the ones who could help me unravel the schemes of the Brotherhood. I left clues, scattered seeds, floated out obscure messages in digital bottles. Many of you, for instance, received an image of the Atasco's virtual city. I put these significators in obscure places, but always at the periphery of the Brotherhood's activities, so that those who had chosen on their own to investigate might stumble on them there. But I was forced to make these hints temporary and vague, in part to protect the Atascos and myself. Those of you who have reached Temaloon, whatever else you may decide about me and my hopes, be proud. You have solved a mystery where perhaps 1,000 others have failed. Sellers paused. Several of the listeners stirred. Why can't we go offline? Demanded the black-haired barbarian's friend. That's the only mystery I want solved? I tried to unplug, and it was like being electrocuted. My real body's in a hospital somewhere, but I'm still jacked in. This is the first I've heard of it. Even over the murmurings of the guests, Sellers sounded surprised. There are things at work in this place that none of us understand yet. I would never hold anyone against their will. He raised his shapeless white hands. I will try to find a solution. You'd better. And what was that thing? Rini asked. The thing that grabbed us. I don't know any other way to put it. When we were entering the simulation, it killed the man who got us here. Atasco says it's a neural network, but Singh said it was alive. Others at the table whispered among themselves. I do not know the answer to that either, Sellers conceded. There is a neural network at the center of Otherland. That much is true. But how it operates and what alive might mean under the circumstances are more undiscovered secrets of this place. That is why I need your help. Help? You need help, all right. Sweet William stood, plumes wagging, and sketched an elaborate and mocking bow. Darlings, my patience has just about gone. I am going bye-bye now. I shall climb into bed with something warm and do my best to forget I heard any of this nonsense. But you can't. The brawny, long-haired man with the action-flick muscles got shakily to his feet. His voice was deep, but his way of speaking seemed incongruous. Don't you understand? Don't any of you understand? This is the Council of Elrond. The painted mouth pursed in a grimace. What are you rattling on about? Don't you know Tolkien? I mean, this is it. One ring to rule them all, one ring to find them. The barbarian seemed to be getting worked up. Rennie, who had been about to say something sharp to Sweet William herself, swallowed her annoyance and watched. There was something almost crazy in the man's excitement, and for a moment Rennie wondered if he might be mentally unbalanced. Oh, one of those short sort of stories, Sweet William said disdainfully. I was wondering about that Mr. Muscle look of yours. You are Orlando, yes? Sellers sounded gently pleased. Or should it be Thargor? The barbarian did a surprised double take. Orlando, I guess? I didn't choose the Thargor body, really. Not for this. It happened when we came here. That's where I've seen him, Rennie whispered to Kabu. Treehouse. Remember, the human breakfast hated his sim. I am glad you're here, Orlando. Sellers again was grave. I hope the others will come to share your beliefs. Share skin. That's truth, said the chrome-plated goggle boy. He crash, you crash, me definitely flying. He stood up, spiky fists on spiky hips, like a grumpy metal porcupine. Orlando would not be discouraged. Don't leave. This is how it always works. People who seem to have no hope, but each has something to give. Together they solve the mystery and conquer the enemy. A group of hopeless idiots all banding together to solve a seemingly impossible task. Is that it? Sweet William was scornfully amused. Yes, indeed, that sounds just like the kind of story you must like, sweetie. But it's just as good a description of a paranoid religious cult. Oh, no, only we clever few understand that the world is coming to an end. But if we move into these storm drains and wear our special aluminum foil hat, we alone will be saved. Spare me that sort of drama, please. I suppose now you'll all take turns telling your pathetic life stories. He drooped a hand across his brow, as though it were all too much to bear. Well, darlings, you can finish your little mad tea party without me. Will someone just shut off whatever bit of silliness is interfering with my command interface? Bolivar Atasco suddenly jerked upright in his seat, then stood and took a few staggering steps. Rennie thought he had been offended by the foppish Sweet William, but Atasco froze in place, hands out as if to balance himself. There was a long instant of expectant silence. He seems to have dropped offline for a moment, Sellers said. Perhaps. Martine began to shriek. She clapped her hands against her head and tumbled to her knees, keening like a toxic spill alarm. What is it? Rennie cried. Martine, what's wrong? Silviana Atasco had gone as motionless as her husband. Sellers stared at her, then at Martine, then vanished like a popped bubble. With Kabu's help, Rennie hauled the Frenchwoman up into a chair, trying to find out what had gone wrong. Martine stopped shrieking, but could only moan as she swayed from side to side. The gathering had flown apart into anxious confusion. Kabu was speaking rapidly but quietly into Martine's ear. Quan Li was asking Rini if she could help. The Goggle Boy and Sweet William were arguing violently. Sellers was gone. The motionless forms of the Atascos still stood at the head of the table. Except now, Bolivar Atasco was moving. "Look!" Rini cried, pointing. The feather-crowned figure stretched its arms out to their full extension, fingers flexing convulsively. It took a staggering step, then braced itself against the table as awkwardly as a blind man. The head sank onto the chest. The guests fell silent as everyone turned to watch Atasco. The head came up again. "I hope none of you think you're going anywhere." It was not Atasco's voice, but someone else's entirely, the vowels broad and flat, the words without warmth. Even the facial expression was subtly different. "Trying to leave would be a very bad idea." The thing wearing Atasco's sim turned to the frozen form of Silviana Atasco. It gave a casual shove, and her sim tumbled out of the chair and landed on the stone floor, still stiffly holding its sitting position. "I'm afraid the Atascos have left early," said the cold voice. "But don't worry. We'll think of ways to keep the party entertaining." Chapter 36. The Singing Harp. Netfeed, personals, wanted, conversation, visual, advertiser, MJ, standard ASEX sim. MJ: "Hey, just wanted to know if there's anyone out there. Anyone want to talk? I'm just feeling kinda, lonely. Just thought there might be someone else out there feeling lonely too." He had hit his head, which made it hard to think of anything else. He was falling, the great canal heaving and spinning upward toward him. Then, through the pain and sparkling darkness, Paul felt things move sideways. A vast spasm that seemed to ripple through him and whip-crack him into fragments. For an instant, everything halted. Everything. The universe lay tipped at an impossible angle. The sky below him like a bowl of blue nothing. The red land and the water tilting away above his head. Galley hung frozen in the middle of the air, with his small body contorted and his hands outflung, one of them touching Paul's own fingers. Paul's other arm stretched above him toward the motionless canal, sunk to the wrist in the glassy water, a cuff of rigid splash stretching back along his forearm. "It's all stopped," Paul thought. Suddenly, a great light burned through everything he could see, scorching it to nothingness, and he was falling again. One instant of darkness, another of fiery brilliance. Darkness, brilliance, darkness, becoming an ever-speeding stroboscopic alternation. He was falling through something, falling between. He could sense Galley somewhere just beyond reach, could feel the boy's terror, but was helpless to relieve it in any way. Then he was abruptly stationary again, down on his hands and knees on cold, hard stone. Paul looked up. A white wall stretched before him, empty but for a huge banner of red, black, and gold. A chalice sprouted twining roses. A crown hovered above them, the legend Ad Aeternum written below it in ornate characters. I've been here before," although he only murmured the slow, astonished words, found little echoes up in the high ceiling. His eyes filled with tears. It was more than the banner, more than the growing sense of familiarity. There were other thoughts crowding in, images, sensations, things that fell onto the parched earth of his memory like a renewing rain. I'm Paul Jonas. I was born in Surrey. My father's name is Andrew. My mother's name is Nell, and she's very sick. Remembrance was taking root in what had been empty places, sprouting and flowering. A walk with his grandmother, young Paul out of primary for the day and pretending to be a growling bear behind a hedge. His first bicycle, tire flat and rim bent, and the awful feeling of shame at having damaged it. His mother, with her chemical respirator and her look of tired resignation. The way the moon hung framed in the branches of a budding plum tree outside his flat in London. Where am I? He examined the stark white walls, the banner with its strangely shifting colors. A new set of memories, filtered up, sharp and bright and jagged as pieces of a broken mirror. A war that seemed to last for centuries. Mud and fear and a flight through strange lands among strange people. And this place, too. He had been here before. Where have I been? How did I get here? Old memories and new were growing together, but in the midst there lay a scar, a barren place they could not cover. The confusion in his head was terrible, but most terrible of all was this blankness. He crouched and raised his hands to his face, covering his eyes as he struggled for clarity. What could have happened? His life had been ordinary. School, a few love affairs, too much time spent hanging about with friends who had more money than he did and could better afford the long drunken lunches and late nights. A not very hard-earned degree in, it took a moment, art history. A job as a bottom-level assistant curator at the Tate, sober suit, wired collar, tour groups wanting to cluck over the new genocide installation. Nothing unusual. He was Paul Robert Jonas. He was all that he had, but that still didn't make him anything special. He was nobody. Why this? Insanity? A head injury? Could there be a madness this detailed, this placid? Not that all of it had been so quiet. He had seen monsters, horrible things. He remembered them just as clearly as he remembered the clothesline on the roof outside his university residence window. Monsters? Clanking, gnashing, steaming. Paul stood up, suddenly frightened. He had been in this place before, and something terrible lived here. Unless he was locked in some incomprehensible kind of false memory, a déjà vu with teeth in it, he had been here, and this was not a safe place. Paul? The voice was faint, far away and thin with desperation, but he knew it even before he knew which part of his life it came from. Gally? The boy had been with him when they had fallen from that flying ship, but Paul had let that knowledge slip away in the rush of returning memory. And now? Was the child being stalked by that huge, impossible thing, the machine giant? Gally! Where are you? No answer. He forced himself to his feet and hurried toward the door at the far end of the hall. On the far side, another imposition of reality and memory, almost painfully potent. Dusty plants stretched out in all directions, reaching toward the roof beams, all but covering the high windows. He was lost in an indoor jungle. Beyond, he knew, he remembered, there was a giant and a woman. a heartbreakingly beautiful woman with wings. Paul! Help! He lurched toward the boy's voice, pushing at the dry, rubbery branches. Leaves came apart in his hands, turning to powder and joining the dust that drifted and swirled at his every movement. The thicket parted before him, the branches falling back, some disintegrating at his touch, to reveal a cage of slender golden bars. The bars were mottled with black and gray smears, and dark tendrils wound through them. The cage was empty. Despite his fear for the boy, Paul felt a shock of disappointment. This was the place she had been. He remembered her vividly, the shimmer of her wings, her eyes, but now the cage was empty. No, almost empty. In the middle, nearly covered by a tangle of vines and roots and the mulch of fallen leaves, something glimmered. Paul crouched and pushed his arm through the tarnished bars, straining to reach the center. His hand closed around something, smooth and cool and heavy. As he lifted it and pulled it back through the bars, a string of chiming notes sounded in the air. It was a harp, a curving golden loop with golden strings. As he held it before him and stared, it warmed beneath his fingers, then began to shrink, curling like a leaf on a bonfire. Within a few moments, it had become as tiny as a 20-pence coin. Paul! I can't! The cry of pain that followed was sharp and sudden in its ending. He stood, startled into trembling, then curled the golden thing in his fist and began to smash his way through the crumbling vegetation. He had gone only a few steps when a door loomed before him, 5 times his own height. He touched it, and it swung inward. The massive, hangar-sized room beyond had timbered beams and walls of piled, undressed stone. Huge wheels turned slowly. Great levers pumped up and down. Gears the size of a double-decker bus chewed their way around the circuit of even larger gears whose full extent was hidden, but whose toothed rims pushed in through vast slots in the walls. The place smelled like oil and lightning and rust and sounded like slow destruction. The noise, the deep, steady ratcheting that vibrated the massive walls, the monotonous hammer thump of great weights falling, was the song of an incomprehensible, unceasing hunger, of machinery that could gnaw away even the foundations of time and space. Galley stood in the one clear space at the center of the room. 2 figures flanked him, one thin, the other immensely fat. A despairing darkness settled behind Paul's eyes as he walked forward. Galley struggled, but the two held him without effort. The slender one was all shiny metal, claw-handed, inhuman, with an eyeless head like a piston. Its companion was so fat that his oily skin was stretched almost to transparency, glowing with a suety yellow-gray light of its own like a massive bruise. The big one's broken tusked mouth spread in a smile whose corners disappeared into the doughy cheeks. You've come back to us, all the way back, and of your own free will. It laughed and the cheeks jiggled. Imagine that, nickel plate. How he must have missed us. It's too bad the old man isn't here to enjoy this moment. Only right that the Jonas should come back, the metallic one said, an inner door opening and shutting in its rectangular mouth. He should be sorry, too, after all the considerable bother he's given us, the naughty fellow. He should beg us to forgive him. Beg us. Let the boy go. Paul had never seen the pair before, but he knew them as well and hated them as powerfully as the cancer that had slowly killed his mother. "It's me you want." "Oh, goodness, it's not just you we want anymore," the metal creature said. "Is it, Butterball?" The fat one shook its head. "First give us what's in your hand. We'll trade that for the boy." Paul felt the hard edges of the harp against the skin of his fingers. Why did they want to bargain? Here in this place of their power, why should they bother? "Don't do it!" Gally shouted. "They can't—" The thing called Butterball tightened slug-like fingers on his arm, and the boy began to writhe and shriek, twitching as though he had fallen onto an electrified rail track. "Give it to us," said Nickel Plate, "and then perhaps the old man will be kind. Things were good for you once, Paul Jonas. They could be good again." Paul could not bear to look at Gally's gaping mouth, agonized eyes. "Where's the woman? There was a woman in that cage." Nickel Plate turned a near featureless face to regard Butterball for a long silent moment, then turned back. "Gone? Flown? But not far? Not for long? Do you want to see her again? That can be arranged." Paul shook his head. He knew these things could never be trusted. "Just let the boy go." "Not until you give us what's in your hand." Butterball made Gally convulse again. Horrified, Paul held out the harp. Both faces, chrome and candle wax, turned greedily toward it. The room shuddered. For a moment, Paul thought the massive machinery had begun to break down. Then, as the walls themselves seemed to shred, he had a sudden and greater fear. The old man! But Nickel Plate and Butterball were also staring, mouths open, as the very planes of geometric form began to slide apart around them. Paul was still standing with his hand outstretched, and Nickel Plate abruptly took an impossibly long stride toward him, shining claws scrabbling for the harp. Gally, who had slumped to the floor, curled his arms around Nickel Plate's shiny legs, and the creature stumbled and fell with a sound of metal scraping on stone. The room, and Paul, and everything shuddered again, then fell apart and curled in on itself. He was frozen in midair above the sky once more, and the great canal and red desert again arched above his head. But the air was now empty where Gally had hung beside him. Where Gally had touched his outstretched fingers, his own hand was now closed in a fist. Even as his bedeviled mind tried to grasp the abrupt transition from the giant's gearhouse back to this perfect stasis, the world surged into life. Colors came unstuck and ran. Solids became air, and the air became water, swallowing Paul with a great cold slurp. He floundered, his lungs full to bursting but beginning to ache. The wet blackness around him was chill and heavy. He could make no sense of up or down. He saw a dim glow, a yellow light, a yellow that might be sunlight, and heaved toward it, wriggling like an eel. For a moment the light surrounded him. Then he was in blackness again, but this time the cold was murderous. He saw light again, a cooler blue, and fought toward it. As he rose, he could see the slender tips of dark trees and gray clouded sky. Then his hand struck and bounced back. He kicked, thrusting his face up toward the light, scrabbling with his fingers, but something solid lay between him and the air, prisoning him in the freezing water. Ice. He smashed at it with his fists, but could not make even a crack. His lungs were filled with burning coals, his head with smothering shadows. Drowning. Somewhere, somehow, and never to know why. And knowledge will die with me about the Grail. The meaningless thought flitted through his deepening personal darkness like a shiny fish. The water was sucking all heat from his body. He could not feel his legs. He pressed his face up against the ice, praying for a pocket of air, but a tiny breath brought him only more wet coldness. It was useless to fight any longer. He opened his mouth to take in the water that would end his pain, then paused for a last instant to try to focus on the glimpse of sky. Something dark covered the hole, and in that same moment the ice and the sky and the clouds crashed down at him, shoving him back and startling the air out of his straining body. He gasped reflexively, and water rushed in, filling him, choking him, obliterating him.
And that's where we're going to stop for tonight. So, I thank you very much for joining me. As I said, we're getting down to the end of the book. I think it'll last out the weekend, but may not last all the way through next weekend. But certainly I will be reading the same time next week. That I'm pretty sure of. And, well, one way or the other, I'll be reading next week. I won't disappear without telling you guys. I won't finish and just vanish. But as I said, after I finish Otherland, I'm going to take a break and think about how I want to move forward and what to do next, for which I will solicit comments, suggestions, curses, warnings, whatever you guys have to offer. Anyway, so once again, I thank you for joining me. Be good to yourselves, be good to your loved ones and your near and dear, but also to those around you who may need a little help in these tough times. And I will be back today, really, at 7 p.m., but then I will return next week, again at 1 a.m., the same time. At least that's California time. So until then, or until I see you next, or whatever it is that it's until, I'll see you real soon. So, peace and good night.